wisconsinwatch.org. That's wisconsinwatch.org. And Jack Kelly, one of the many fine writers and journalists from that organization, joins us here at the desk in our studio. Jack, appreciate you being here. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, good to be back. Good, as always, to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I think we're going to start doing this on a regular basis. I appreciate that because Mondays, there always seems to be a lot to get through, and you folks, people can sign up for your newsletter, which is fantastic. They can also check out the stories at wisconsinwatch.org, but this will be great now on Mondays to have you help us sort through the news of the weekend, despite the fact I hear now that you're a Chicago fan as well.
Just baseball. Just
baseball. But you're a Packer fan.
I am a Packer fan, and let's keep in mind, the NFL reigns supreme, certainly in my household. So
Very good. All right. Let's turn to a little news. Over the weekend, we have a 2026 seems to be a long ways away, but I guess these days in political terms, it is not. Yeah. And we do not know whether or not Governor Evers is going to run for re-election on the Democratic side, but there's already an entry in the Kentucky Derby of politics in Wisconsin, the governor's race.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So, Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman got into the race over the weekend. And there could be many more Republican candidates to come as well. It could be a quite crowded Democratic primary if Governor Tony Evers decides not to seek a third term. He has gone back and, he has not publicly said what he plans to do. He keeps saying, I want to wait until after the state budget. When you talk to folks in the know, it seems to go back and forth. So I think the question remains outstanding there. But an interesting entry into the race here from Josh Schoeman. I think that in some ways he might remind people, going back to yesteryear, of someone like Governor Scott Walker, Milwaukee area county executive, younger guys, 43, combat veteran, and could potentially be an interesting foil for somebody like Tony Evers, who would be, almost 30 years his senior. And we saw how effectively Republicans were able to weaponize President Joe Biden's age against him. Obviously the governor is still a good decade younger than the former president was, but is another person who is, not known for his public speaking. It would be interesting to see how that dynamic would play in the race. So fascinating as always, right. Wisconsin politics, 18 months out.
I really don't know the guy at all. I don't know a lot about him. Is he regarded in Washington County as someone who can get things done? Is he fairly partisan? Do we know a lot about this guy?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he popped onto my radar just in the last couple of weeks when the rumors started swirling that he was getting interested in it. I believe he was on the county board and has been a mover and shaker kind of in county level politics for a while. Of course, Washington County is one of the counties, right? We love to talk about the WOW counties when it comes to Wisconsin politics. I think it's interesting to see, if you look at statewide candidates recently, right? Eric Hovde was a Madison Democrat. Brad Schimmel had a lot of previous baggage from being a statewide elected official. Of course, he was from Waukesha County, but, he was attorney general, and the sexual assault kit backlog, et cetera, was really baggage that I think hit him hard, as well as Elon Musk's influence in the state Supreme Court race came back to bite him probably. It'll be interesting for me to see if a guy like Josh Schoeman, who comes from the heartland of Republican politics in this state, is able to gain some traction. There's something to be said about getting in the race early. If you pick up some momentum, maybe some key endorsements to scare some people off, raise some money, it could be interesting. It would be really interesting for me to see, you would have kind of a really interesting dichotomy of the two-term Democratic governor, been a public servant for a long time, versus a much younger opponent kind of from the Republican heartland in the state. So I think that, that hypothetical shapes up to be interesting. It also shapes up to be interesting when you consider if Evers does decide not to retire, not seek a third term, the whole line of potential Democratic candidates as well. So it would be interesting to see in 26 if we had an open governor's race. I think that that would be pandemonium for sure.
Interesting. I just found it interesting as someone who likes to study politics or pay attention. Yesterday, on the old Twitter, Twix, X, whichever you want to call it, Bill McCoshen, a longtime Republican. Bill McCoshen, of course, former Chief of Staff and Secretary of Commerce under former Republican Governor Tommy Thompson, tweeted this out. He says, "The case against a GOP gubernatorial primary. One, the consulting class is willing to destroy their competition in the primary because the bigger payday comes in the general. Two, candidates buy the notion that they have to go nuclear to win. And third, neither Tommy Thompson or Scott Walker had to destroy their opponents in their primary to win. Rather, they had mostly compelling vision and positive messaging to attract a majority of primary voters, and they dramatically outworked their opponents. That from Bill McCoshen over the weekend. I just found it interesting. I'm not trying to read into that. I don't know whether Bill McCoshen is a showman guy or not, or whether he's just saying Republicans shouldn't destroy their own. And I would say that probably the Democrats, to a certain degree, these primaries these days are just brutal.
Yeah, I mean they are bruising for sure. I think I think there's 2 points here to lift up. Maybe nothing better demonstrates how bruising they can be than the 2022 Republican gubernatorial primary between Tim Michels, a late entry, and former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Clayfish. Michels spent literally a small fortune, several $1 million on TV ads, and then got the Trump endorsement and was able to get across the finish line ultimately, pretty comfortably in that race. But it's hard, and we saw that, and then, of course, 2022 was quite a good political environment for Democrats, especially coming off of the Dobbs decision, et cetera. But you saw the Republican Party of Wisconsin and its chairman, right? Chairman Schimming wanted to move away from primaries right away. He talked about we need to avoid a primary in the 24 U.S. Senate race. Hovde didn't really have a serious primary opponent. He talked about it again in the state Supreme Court race, of course, nonpartisan on paper only, as your listeners probably very well know at this point. And they didn't really have that, right? There was no February primary like we saw in 23 when Dan Kelly and Jennifer Duro beat up on each other. And then Jana Protasewicz just blew Dan Kelly out of the water. And so, they're interested in avoiding this. That being said, the last 2 times that they were able to avoid it, their candidate still lost on the Republican side. And so, there maybe is something to being tested in the primaries. Then again, primary day to election day in Wisconsin is only 3 months. That's pretty short compared to many states. And so if you have to spend a lot of money and a lot of time winning one small piece of the electorate, which is the Republican primary base, that can set you back in the 90-day sprint to the finish line for the general election.
Yeah. We're talking with Jack Kelly. He is from WisconsinWatch.org. That's WisconsinWatch.org. Let's go to the phone line quickly, 855-752-4842. Oz is on the phone listening in beautiful Washington County. Oz, thanks for listening and calling. What's he?
Well, thanks for the great show.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like your laugh.
Well, thanks. That came from the genes, So,
a little cheesy today?
What did you want to say, Oz?
Well, anyhow, I'm talking about Josh Schumann, whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the bus for Trump back in November. Big bandwagon. And our property tax went up like $200 this year.
In Washington County?
Yes, Washington County.
So you live there. What's your opinion of Showman, and what kind of reputation does he have?
He sends out a nice, colorful newsletter telling how great our Washington County is and everything. Well, it's fine. It was fine for a while, and we haven't got that for a while now. So,
So he does some So he apparently does some PR work, but you're saying your property taxes, and who knows? There's lots of different things that go into property taxes going up, but at least your personal property taxes have gone up.
Especially when we're on a fixed income,
Right. No, absolutely. I appreciate the call. Oz. Thank you so very much. You have a great day there in beautiful Washington County, Jack. Again, I think that's gonna, it's gonna. Still way early, but we'll see how this kind of comes out in terms of. I'm always interested because the photo, was it the photo or the video of the announcement, and he's in the plaid shirt with the camo baseball cap, and I'm like, like Scott Walker. He wasn't a real hunter, a real motorcycle rider, but because Tommy Thompson set the stage, who really is and was a hunter and Harley rider. So Walker tried to become that persona. It'll be interesting to see. I have no idea. Maybe Showman is, but I just thought it seemed a little too on point for me in that opener.
Yeah, he was doing some media today as well, and the whole time he's doing some appearances and. kind of the trucker cap with the camo and the Showman for Governor logo on the front of it. And so, it is definitely, when you're going to run a statewide campaign, you need to send as many signals to voters as you possibly can. And I think that the plaid flannel with the vest and the hat sends a message. And also if you watch the launch video, big emphasis on son of a Lutheran pastor, a lot of emphasis on his faith, many mentions of his service in Kuwait, and those are some of the kind of hallmarks that candidates really try to lift up when they're trying to make a first impression.
Before we get off of this quickly, you're reporting. I'm hearing that Evers is telling people both he's running and not running. Any insight into that?
I every few days I check in with folks, and it really does flip back and forth. I hear similar things. It's I think on one of the last conversations I had, it was definitely leaning towards yes. He's had a lot of success, especially in the courts recently, in the state court, especially in front of the state Supreme Court, especially, and that could really. Some of those wins could set him up potentially, if he were to win a third term, to have more power than he's had the last kind of 6.5 years. And so, it'll be interesting to see. If nothing else, Tony Evers remains an outstanding fundraiser, and so he could probably raise, 20-30 million bucks in a heartbeat, which goes a long ways. Especially, it's not that expensive to buy advertising in Wisconsin for a candidate.
No, exactly right, and interesting to see in terms of. Now that you're not going to have Ben Wickler as the chairman of the Democrats anymore, because Wickler is stepping down, you get Joseph Pecky. Does he step into that role? Can he keep the gravy train rolling for money for Democrats? Was it, to your point, do you think it's really Evers who's the great fundraiser, or is it Ben Wickler helping the Evers campaign fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, that is a fascinating dynamic as well, right? I think that... God, I don't remember the exact number, but in terms of statewide elections, while Ben Wickler was chair of the Democratic Party, I think he only lost 4 or 5 of them. He was 19-4 or something, which is
incredible.
A lot to do with the fundraising, of course. They run circles around the state Republican Party by and large.
We're going to come back, talk more to Jack Kelly of Wisconsin Watch after this. Has a great story, a link to Massachusetts with the arrest of Judge Dugan in Milwaukee last week. Talked to Jack Kelly about that. Stay with us at the All Ball Show for Monday on the Civic Media Radio Network. Coming up in hour 2, a little energy drink edition of What's Worse Today. We talked about, because you were here pitch hitting on Friday, Sam, Red Bull and Monster.
That's right.
And you said you hadn't had either one, right?
Right, correct.
Right. So we'll see. Jack Kelly from WisconsinWatch.org. What's worse, Monster or Red Bull?
Oh, man. I think probably Monster.
Really?
But I couldn't tell you the last time that I had an energy drink. Actually, I could probably tell you the last time I had a Red Bull, but it was probably an undergrad, and it was not just Red Bull. So.
A little mixer.
A little something else alongside it, probably.
Chuckster listening in on WMDX here in Madison, but he's down in beautiful Racine. We were talking about Shulman entering the governor's race on the GOP side. Says Shulman's been taking shots at Governor Evers. He was the county administrator. Oh, this is nice. Who allowed Washington County golf courses to open during COVID-19 and shut when all the other courses were shut down nationwide in the early days of COVID in April 2020. So there you go. There's something.
I mean, but to that point, that is exactly the kind of culture warrior thing that could endear you to in a Republican primary, especially to someone like President Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, they're all going for Trump's blessing, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Trump endorsement is make or break. I think.
I use the term jokingly that they all like to genuflect before Trump, and now over the weekend, he literally, this is real, Truth Socialed out a picture of himself in the Pope's costume dress and says he wants to be Pope. I'm not making that up.
I think he said this morning on Air Force, I think it was on Air Force One. He's not sure how that got reshared on the account. So.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. On the more serious side, you wrote a great piece at Wisconsin Watch, Jack Kelly, here entitled "Arrest a Milwaukee Judge Echoes Massachusetts Case with One Key Difference." Give us the details.
Yeah, so it was striking how many details were similar in this. So this goes back to a 2019 case, which involves a 2018 incident. It took federal prosecutors several months to, collect evidence and impanel the grand jury and get an indictment of a Massachusetts judge named Shelley Richmond Joseph. In that case, Joseph was accused of helping an unauthorized immigrant avoid an ICE agent after a court appearance. To do so, it was alleged that she had the defendant leave her courtroom through a non-public exit, and then eventually another courthouse official actually badged this gentleman out of the back of the building. And so both Judge Joseph and another court official were indicted. Of course, that probably sounds similar if you've heard any of the details in the case of Hannah Dugan, Judge Hannah Dugan in Milwaukee County. The criminal complaint against her alleges that she, told this defendant to come with her and led them through a non-public exit, which, when you talk to people who spend a lot of time in the Milwaukee County Courthouse would say, well, they actually ended up in the public hallway anyways. As they noted, the agents watched them walk to the elevator, decided not to arrest them, then waited for them to go outside, and then eventually the man tried to flee, and they caught him after a foot pursuit. And so, kind of those parallels of this idea of letting somebody through a non-public exit to try to avoid ICE officials. That key difference, and you might have picked up on it there, I talked about how prosecutors secured an indictment of the Massachusetts judge in 2019. That is not what happened in the case in Milwaukee so far, at least unless it has happened in the last 20 minutes and I've missed something. They served her with a federal criminal complaint, which I'm told by former federal prosecutors is quite unusual. So how do you get a federal criminal complaint? You, as the prosecutor, go before a federal judge. In this instance, it was a federal magistrate judge, and have to establish probable cause. If the judge signs off on it, then you can do it, and then it can lead to the arrest and the booking and everything else that we've seen. That's very different than getting an indictment, which is where prosecutors go before a grand jury of other, in this instance would be other Wisconsin residents, and present evidence to show that there is probable cause and then secure an indictment. And it's also noteworthy because it starts a clock. So there is a clock. I was told it was 21 days. And so if this was, 2 Fridays ago, they have 21 days from that day to put their evidence together, seat a grand jury, make their arguments, and then try to secure an indictment. And if they don't, the charges could get thrown out. People were very critical of this. I was talking to a former federal prosecutor who is a law professor in California now. She made the point to me that normally when you're doing this via a criminal complaint, it's somebody is a flight risk or they're a danger to the community and you need to take them into custody now. There's no evidence of that. Judge Dugan is in her 60s. She's a sitting circuit court judge. There's no evidence that she was a flight risk. Stephen Kravitz, who's another Milwaukee area attorney, who's a former federal prosecutor as well, went so far as to say that, the point of doing it this way was to make a political point. He told me, he said, quote, normally a person charged even with felonies age 60 plus with no record and no chance of fleeing would be summoned to show up at an appointed time for a booking and arraignment. Not here. And that was the point. And so it is really striking between these two cases, very similar circumstances, but they went the more traditional route back in 2019, grand jury indictment, versus this kind of hurried criminal complaint process. And when you ask folks who are familiar in the space, they would say that was the point, to send a message.
And that's why I love it. You folks at WisconsinWatch.org is that you boil this stuff down as you just did for us here. You give us the facts, and when you get the entertainment out of it, it appears, you're reporting and others, that this really was intentional to somehow intimidate the court system, to intimidate the public, that, hey, you cross us, this is what's happening. And I think that, for me at least, I'll speak for myself, is one of the most disturbing things about this whole incident is this suppression of the public, suppression of the courts, and capitulation to one person in Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it's also worth pointing out, the FBI director, Kash Patel, tweeted about this, then deleted it, later tweeted, I believe it was Director Patel who tweeted out the photo of her in handcuffs. Right. Again, this is a 60-something woman. She's a sitting elected official. When the now president, formerly the former president, was indicted, he did not show up in handcuffs. So the AG talked about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Always great to talk with you, Jack Kelly. You can find all these stories and more at WisconsinWatch.org. We'll see you soon, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Stay tuned. Hour 2 is next.
Sure did.
Thank you. I appreciate it.